Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's race C is Group 2 at Fuji with soft tires and a required pit stop. The modern Group 2 cars are really dominant, but I've got just the thing to fight them. Let's get into it. The Anti-Meta car of the week is once again the Lexus SC430. It doesn't handle nearly as well as the top 3 modern Super GT cars, but it has much higher top speed and even better tire wear. On top of that, if you do get one of those cars behind you, it's going to be really tough because of the dirty air for them to do anything except the straight, and you're going to be faster on the straight anyways. As of about an hour ago, literally only 6 cars on the top 100 are not the NSX concept. One person got an Audi ahead of me. I have the fastest SC430 time in the world, just barely squeaking under 1 minute and 30 seconds, and there are only 4 other cars that are not the NSX in the top 100. That's wild. The front straight at Fuji is incredibly long, and because of that, you're probably going to be really close to people when you're actually racing them, so I urge you to take note of things all around the braking zone, not just the braking zone. I like to brake about 20 meters before the 100 meter board, which is just about when you get all the way past the beginning of the bleachers on the left. Brake in a straight line all the way down to second gear till you get to the 50 meter board on the left. You'll also cross that white line, and as soon as you start turning in, downshift to first, keeping heavy pressure on the brakes. You want to go over the first part of the curb right there, but not all the way into the AstroTurf. Back up to second gear and be very gentle. If you slide it all here, you're going to lose a lot of momentum. Gently align yourself with the track on the side of the grass right there after that little kink. There are 2 things I want you to look for as you approach the next corner. After the 100 meter board, you're going to see that this white line turns black, and briefly after that is this orange dot that's on the fence. What you want to do is brake after you get past the black part of the white line and turn in at the orange dot. As you trail brake in towards the cone on the inside of the corner, downshift to third super quickly, and the compression braking will actually allow you to come off the brakes a lot earlier than usual. Upshift to fourth and get on the throttle as soon as you pass that cone. You want to use as much of the red and white curbing as you possibly can, but look at this divot in the middle of it. If you get your tire stuck in there, you will slide out. Also take note that as long as your left tires are beyond the white line by the end of the white part of the curbing there, you're going to be totally fine. Immediately start turning in to match the curve of the next corner, and as soon as your car stops responding, you've got to lift off the throttle very gently, trying to maintain as much throttle as you can while also allowing the front end to have enough weight to tuck in. Looking for this orange dot, I like to apex just a little bit after that, using the throttle to get myself a little bit closer while staying as much on the throttle as I can, but then immediately after apexing, come almost entirely off the throttle. Steer in, but not so much that you can hear the tires too much, and then get back on the throttle. I should have gotten a little bit closer before getting on the throttle, but I wanted to keep up my momentum there. If you find yourself to the left like I am right here, I want you to pay attention what I'm about to do when I unpause it. Right about the start of the curb on the right, I start lifting off the throttle just gently to start coaxing the car towards the inside, but when I get to the orange dot on the right, that's when I straighten the wheels out before then hitting the brakes. If you had a little bit more throttle discipline and you're a little bit closer to the inside, then you might need to brake just a little bit earlier because you're going to probably be carrying a little bit more speed. Either way, get down to second gear quickly and turn in just after the 50 meter board that you just saw on the right. If you go over or beyond the red and white part of this curb, it can really upset the balance of the car, and that will delay how long it takes for you to get back on the throttle. Notice I'm still not at full throttle at this point. With this amount of steering angle at this speed in full throttle in second gear, you will certainly spin. You'll have to wait until you've straightened out the wheels just a little bit before you can get on full throttle, and that's just going to take experience with this car to figure out when that's going to be. If you are still turning a lot and full throttle when you hit this curb, you will spin, so be careful and make sure that you straighten out the tires before you get to that point. You don't need to go wide for that little kink or this one. As soon as you get past this one though, aim for the left side of the track and keep your eye on the Dunlop sign. Once you're on the other side of that Dunlop sign, brake heavy in a straight line, avoiding braking on the curb. I was a little bit naughty and went up on the curb at the end, but as long as you don't do most of your braking on the curb, you're going to be fine. If you look to the right where the barrier ends, that is when you want to turn in and not before that. You should be in first gear by the time you turn in, and you should still be braking really heavily as you approach it, but before you get to the curb, you should be completely off the brakes in order to allow the front tires to steer the car even more. The trick here is to add as much throttle as you can without it affecting the trajectory of the car. Only your steering wheel right now should change the trajectory of your car. Aim to where it says Dunlop here, far to the right of the next corner, because you need space to turn in and apex late. Notice I was able to sneak in a moment of full throttle. That's very important. Come off only as much throttle as you need to get all the way up on this curb, upshift to second gear, and then get back on the throttle, continuing to steer to the left. It's very important to note both the direction I'm facing right now, heading directly at Mount Fuji, as well as the fact that I'm not really steering as I'm going full throttle over that section of curb. Right where the grass transitions to AstroTurf is when you're going to lift off, turn in, brake very gently, and get down to second gear. You're going to want to come off the brakes very early, but not abruptly. You've got to keep a little bit of brake pressure to make sure the car doesn't slide off where you're trying to go. Again, don't use too much of the curb because it can upset the balance of the car. If you see there's a crest in the road right here, and after you get past the highest part of it, you can then go to full throttle, but not a moment before that. Again, we want to go as straight as possible over the curb, making sure that we only have 2 tires on the red and white part. Also, take note of my steering angle. If you steer here and your tire catches the groove, you're going to slide. When you're fully on the pavement, you can start turning in a bit more. At the end of the curb here on the left, we're going to downshift to second, gently brake, and then downshift all the way to first gear. As you fully come off the brakes, add a lot more steering at the end, trying to go straight over this curb as well. Second gear, and again, gently on the throttle. Once again, we're going to go as far into the curb as we possibly can. You're safe on the red and white part. As I come off before the end of the curb, I want you to take note of the fact that I'm actually turning left to try to cut across the track as fast as I can so I can align myself with the left side of the track as early as possible. Once again, there's an orange dot on the fence all the way out to the left, and when you get all the way past it, then you can start to brake. It's very easy to understeer yourself off the track, so make sure you have enough room and you're not really close to the outside curb because you're still going to be facing it by the time you hit the brakes. Continue trail braking, downshifting to second and then to first gear, but you're going to ultimately have to come entirely off the brakes around the time you get to the end of the curb on the left, and then just allow your car to rotate before then getting back on the throttle. I got on the throttle a little too early, so I blipped it to get the car to rotate. Did that a little bit too much, but I was okay in the end. As long as you're going pretty much straight when you hit that outside curb, you can go all the way up on the AstroTurf as long as your right tires are still on the red and white part of that curbing. You can also cut the last corner instead of just missing it like I did, and you can save yourself a lot of time. Like I mentioned in the breakdown, you've got to make sure that you know exactly where you are on track, so take note of the light pole on the right, the bleachers on the left, and of course where the curb is, because you're not really going to be able to see past any cars if you're really close to any cars, and you don't want to blow your braking point or run into anyone there. Downshifting to third really quickly going into this corner allows you to get entirely off the brakes a little bit earlier than if you stay in fourth. Then you can pop back up to fourth gear. You'll actually be able to get on the throttle a lot earlier and be able to keep up more speed than if you use the brakes to slow down in fourth gear. That sweeping right-hander is always about a mix of trying to keep up your speed, but also trying not to go too far away from the inside. It's really difficult, and there are probably like 5 or 6 different ways that you can do it, but just try to keep up your speed and try not to go too far away from the inside. For this hairpin, you've got to make sure you don't turn in before you get to the very, very last second, and afterwards continue turning. You want to give yourself space here. This entire section is about giving yourself space to navigate for the next corner and giving yourself enough time to slow down before it. A lot of people just brake way too late here, and that's why a lot of people lose time. If you're going really slow here, or if you're losing a lot of time, you're most likely just completely blowing by your apexes. Think of the line first, and you can try to figure out how to go through the line faster in the end. And right here, as you can see, I got on the throttle too early. I did it because I thought the car was going to rotate too much, but instead of going over that last curb on the inside, I completely missed it. If I had gone 2 wheels on the inside of that curb, I would have been able to get on the throttle fully a lot earlier, and we probably would have had a 0.8. So in the first race of the day, I jumped in this car. I hadn't done any races at all, and I actually got second place, but unfortunately, I have an issue with my keyboard that keeps moving up and selecting random things, so I had my microphone turned on.
Octopus to the party, I still don't get that.
As you can hear, it clearly picked up all of the audio from when I was streaming, and that makes it very difficult to actually break down anything during the race, so I'm just going to jump to the end. It was such a good race, and I finished in second with the anti-meta car from 13th, so I just wanted to show you this, but all is not lost because I did fix the issue before the end of the stream, and I did finish with another pretty good result. So let's try that again. Unfortunately, I didn't get nearly as good of a finishing position in this one, and in fact, I made some really embarrassing mistakes, but it's gonna have to do. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this car does not handle nearly as well as the NSX or even either of the other 2 modern GT500 cars. It does, however, have much higher top speed, and it saves tires better than the other cars. In a lot of cases, it would be a really big problem, especially at Fuji, for a car to not have really good handling because the entire third sector is entirely a handling sector. The community pretty much universally agrees that the dirty air is an issue and it's very annoying. It's much worse than real life. You can actually watch these cars race and you'll notice that they're very easily able to stick with each other really closely. Whereas in Gran Turismo, it's almost impossible to maintain the same pace as one of these cars when you're in one of these cars and following really closely. The cars that suffer the most from the dirty air are the really high downforce cars, and that's actually one of the reasons that the 2016 GT500 cars handle so much better than this, the downforce. Since this car has less downforce, it is less affected, which means that the dirty air isn't really going to affect you quite as much in this, and it's going to affect the people trying to chase you in the faster cars much more, especially in Sector 3, where they would usually shine. And if you can keep them behind you before the straight, you'll most likely be able to stay all the way in front of them until the next braking zone, and if not, you should still be able to fight for your position at the end. Now, it might have looked like I made a mistake there, but in reality, I just wanted to start as far from the back as possible. No, I'm kidding. I made a huge mistake. You got to be really careful, especially if you're going on the outside of T1. One, that people don't push you off, and two, if you do choose to go on that outside line, if you touch the curb at all, especially at the beginning of the race when your tires are cold, it's going to be really easy to slide out, so just be prepared for that kind of thing. I like to talk about knowing the other cars really well to know about what strategy you can employ against them, and that car, the brand new TSO20, handles incredibly bad compared to the rest of the cars, even this older one. So if you end up behind one of them, you should do everything you can to get in front of it before the straight, because it is hilariously fast in the straight. I believe it goes 190 miles an hour in the straight, whereas this car, that's much faster than the modern cars, goes 180. So it is a big pain in the butt if you can't get all the way away from it. I mentioned before that it's very important to note exactly when you should brake and make sure you know exactly where you are on track before T1, and one of the reasons I mention that is because most people are not going to be super aware of exactly where they are, and it's going to be really difficult for the average person to navigate these corners, as you can see by the two people in the distance and Rapid Turtle coming back on track, as well as that other guy coming back on track. You're probably going to find chaos at turn 1 every single lap. Another thing of note is that this community doesn't very often get to drive these cars in a competitive setting, so the skill gap is actually really massive between people who are used to driving these things a lot and people who rarely ever get the chance. So even people who would usually be really quick in the daily races are not necessarily going to be really quick in these cars. I am definitely not talking about Voidsy and Andre because they're doing a fine job, but you might find that people that you race a lot aren't going to be really as quick with these cars because, like I said, we don't get a chance to drive them very often. I want you to pay really close attention to how much I'm taking different lines than I might usually take, as well as being a lot more gentle both on the brakes and the throttle as I'm trying to follow these guys. One, people are going to make mistakes, and two, you are still going to have dirty air even though you're going to have less of an effect of the dirty air than the 2016 cars will. This final corner is really important, and as long as you're patient enough to hit the apex and you're close enough to one of these cars, as long as you don't slide out, you should be able to pass them even if they have slip as well, as you're going to see. Now, Voidsy here is a really cool guy. He's actually just going to lift as I pass, but even if he didn't, I'd still be able to get all the way past him. As you can see, I'm getting behind Andre, and I'm able to get in front of him as well, and that right there is the main power of this car versus the meta car. For the time trial, I ended up using +5 on the brakes. I had +4 during the race, but I think even in the race, +5 would be just fine. A lot of times we don't want to use really high to the rear brake balance because it can actually increase the braking distance quite a bit. But this car doesn't seem to have any issues using +5 brakes and stopping really quickly still. Most people are probably going to split this right down the middle and pit on lap 6. Some people are going to go early, going for the undercut. I chose to undercut and go on lap 5, but as you can see, my tires are still pretty good. It's also important to note exactly how I took that pit entry. You can go a lot faster than you might think, and the lines aren't quite as strict as they are on other tracks. Even if you don't consider yourself very good at tire management, I think you can safely pit anywhere between lap 5 and lap 7, giving yourself a little bit of an extra stint either before or after the pit. As you come out of the pits, look for the end of the pit line on the left and brake a little bit before then. You should be fine. You should be able to hit your apex and maintain your speed through there. Going back to my last point, if you consider yourself very good at tire management, then I think it's really safe for you to go in on lap 4 or even as late as lap 8, and you should actually be completely fine. If you feel like being extremely risky, I think you could actually survive pitting on lap 3 or lap 9. It really depends on the traffic in front of you or where you anticipate coming out in traffic. So of course, make the best call. You want to make sure that you come out of the pits without any traffic. So if people are holding you back, go in the pits and keep in mind the different pit windows I just talked about based on how good you are at tire management. Jumping ahead 3 more laps, the pit was so effective that we saw almost no one else until now, and we did get a little bit closer to Velosa, but he would have definitely had it had he not given himself a pen, and thanks to this car's massive top speed, we're able to get all the way in front of him and stay in front of him there. We also passed that guy Isael because he kept spinning himself in the races today. Jumping ahead to the middle of the next lap, I warned you guys not to get on the throttle too heavily on this left-hander, right? Well, sometimes I don't take my own advice. I jumped on the throttle for absolutely no reason, and I lost that position that I got. Velosa had really good pace though, and he definitely earned this. If not for that penalty, I would have not gotten in front of him most likely. Maybe, but who knows. But either way, I ended up losing 2 positions because of that one bit of oversight. I jumped on the throttle for absolutely no reason. Now, despite the fact that we lost 2 positions, I knew that that Isael guy had actually gone for a big undercut even before I went for the pits, so his tires were definitely suffering. The NSX does not handle tire wear anywhere near as good as this car does. As you can see, I still have pretty good tire wear, and also, if you remember, I got in front of him initially because he completely spun out. So his tires were completely done. I knew that if I got in front of him, then it would be game over and he would not be able to get back in front of me. And when we did pass him here, it looks like he didn't even have the slip from Velosa, or even if he did, it was just barely anything because, again, he destroyed his tires with the NSX. The NSX does not handle tire wear, and that is the one major downfall of that car. As you can see here, he got a little desperate. A lot of people have been doing that, and that's actually why he spun in the first place. And so from here on out, it was a pretty easy run to maintain 5th place. At the very end, we got one more position because our friend Sosa had let off because he was going to let Randy go. I was not paying attention to the chat. Randy, who was using his main account, had gotten some really harsh penalties, and so I should have actually let him go because this account means absolutely nothing to me. I just stream with this account. If I lose DR, it doesn't matter. But if you're using your main account, you can actually lose thousands of DR if you risk doing a daily race. So I'm sorry, Randy. As always, I'd like to thank you for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And as promised, we're going to finish off with a list of all of my new members for the very first time. I'm very excited, and I appreciate you all very much. Thank you.